The royal family has always been shrouded in mystery, but few scandals have captivated the world quite like the troubled marriage between Princess Diana and Prince Charles.
There were many arguments behind closed doors. Their relationship was not one of a great love affair.
What if I told you that new letters from Prince Philip to Diana have just been leaked, revealing bombshell secrets about the royal couple and their turbulent relationship? Let's dive into the secrets these letters expose and unravel the complicated dynamics between Diana, Charles, and Philip. The fairy tale that wasn't. When Charles and Diana first met, the world was captivated. Their courtship started quietly, but as soon as word got out, the media pounced. Newspapers, magazines, and television channels everywhere painted the story as a fairy tale romance. But guess what? Prince Philip's secret letters to Diana just leaked the whole secrets about King Charles. However, before we get to that, we must take this story from the beginning and see how Philip even got involved in his son's marriage in the first place. So Diana was portrayed as a shy, innocent young woman about to marry into the most famous royal family in the world. But while it looked magical on the surface, there were already signs that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Charles had been under pressure to find a wife, and Diana, coming from a noble background, seemed to be the ideal candidate. Yet, their relationship lacked a deep connection. In fact, they only spent a limited amount of time together before their engagement. For Diana, the sudden attention that comes with becoming a part of the royal family was overwhelming. Before her relationship with Charles, she was a young kindergarten teacher living quietly in London. Suddenly, she was thrust into the global spotlight, and every move she made was scrutinized. She had to look perfect, act perfect, and fit into a royal family that was steeped in centuries of tradition. Diana's life changed overnight. The public adored her, and every appearance she made was met with cheers and admiration. But behind her warm smile and kind eyes, Diana was already feeling the weight of expectations that would follow her for the rest of her life. On July 29, 1981, the world tuned in to watch what was called the wedding of the century. An estimated 750 million people around the world watched as Diana walked down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral in a stunning gown with a 25-foot train. It was a moment filled with grandeur, tradition, and royal splendor that the world would remember for years. To the public, it was a dream come true. A prince marrying his princess in a lavish ceremony. But behind the glamour, the reality was much more complicated. Charles and Diana were already dealing with issues that would later become public knowledge. For one, their personalities couldn't have been more different. Diana was warm, sensitive, and eager for affection, while Charles was introverted, intellectual, and more reserved. And let's not forget about their age gap. At just 20 years old, Diana was still discovering herself, while Charles, at 32, had already lived a much fuller life, shaped by royal duties, long-standing friendships, and expectations to one day be king. Nevertheless, one of the most significant challenges in their relationship was Charles's continuing friendship with Camilla Parker Bowles, a woman he had been romantically involved with years earlier. Even as Charles stood at the altar with Diana, Camilla's presence loomed over their marriage. Many didn't know at the time, but Camilla would remain a central figure in Charles's life, casting a shadow over his relationship with Diana and the rest of the royal family. Even before they tied the knot, cracks were beginning to show in Charles and Diana's relationship. Charles remained close to Camilla, and Diana, young and inexperienced in royal life, started feeling uneasy about their bond. Her insecurities only grew after their wedding, as Charles continued to spend time with Camilla, fueling rumors that would later shake the very foundation of their marriage. For Diana, the pressures of royal life only added to her personal struggles. She felt isolated within the royal family, unable to confide in anyone about how overwhelmed she felt. Although the public adored her, Diana often felt alone and misunderstood. The royal family had its own way of handling emotions, keeping things private and distant, which clashed with Diana's desire for closeness and warmth. On top of everything, Diana began to struggle with her mental health. The constant pressure to appear perfect in public while dealing with personal doubts and her relationship problems took its toll. Diana later revealed that she suffered from bulimia during this time, a response to the overwhelming stress she was under. The royal family, bound by tradition and formalities, didn't know how to handle her struggles, leaving Diana to feel even more isolated. As Diana put it in her own words, "I was always someone else's agenda." Her life seemed to revolve around what others needed her to be, a royal icon, a mother, a wife, but rarely did anyone ask what she needed. The media portrayed her as the radiant princess, but behind the scenes, Lady Di was fighting battles that no one could see: the cracks. Anyhow, as I already mentioned, before Charles married Diana, there was already someone who had captured his heart. Charles and Camilla had been romantically involved years before Diana came into the picture, and although their relationship didn't progress to marriage back then, Camilla remained a close friend and confidant to Charles. The depth of their connection was undeniable, and this bond would soon play a crucial role in the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage. From the start, Diana was aware of Charles' ongoing friendship with Camilla, but she didn't know just how deep their relationship ran. As their marriage unfolded, it became clear that Charles' emotional ties to Camilla never faded. Although the two tried to present a united front in public, cracks were beginning to show behind the scenes. Diana grew increasingly suspicious of Charles's loyalty, especially as he continued to stay in close contact with Camilla. The media played a huge role in exposing these cracks. Rumors about Charles and Camilla's relationship spread like wildfire, and the public began to sense that something wasn't right. In a now famous moment that shocked the world, Diana herself confirmed these suspicions during her 1995 Panorama interview. When asked about Charles's relationship with Camilla, Diana famously responded, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." This simple yet devastating statement captured the essence of Diana's struggle. She was never truly alone in her marriage with Charles. Camilla's presence loomed large, and it was something Diana felt deeply. Despite their attempts to maintain the facade of a happy marriage for the public, the emotional gap between Charles and Diana widened, and Camilla remained a significant factor in the tension. As Charles grew closer to Camilla, Diana found herself increasingly isolated, not just from her husband, but from the entire royal family. The warmth and affection she had hoped for within the royal household were hard to come by. Diana, a young woman going through the pressures of royalty, felt alone in a family that was bound by tradition and emotional restraint. To make matters worse, the media's obsession with Diana was growing by the day. On the surface, she was the beloved people's princess, adored by millions. But the constant scrutiny wore her down. Every move she made was reported, criticized, and discussed by the tabloids, putting enormous pressure on her to appear perfect at all times. While the public couldn't get enough of her, Diana felt suffocated. Diana also struggled with her mental health during these difficult years. The pressure to conform to royal expectations, coupled with her deteriorating marriage, took a toll on her emotional well-being. Behind closed doors, Diana faced battles with bulimia and depression. Her bulimia, a secret she kept for many years, was both a response to the pressure she felt and a cry for help in a world where she had few people to turn to. She later described the disorder as a form of control when everything else in her life felt chaotic. Despite these struggles, Diana found solace in her public life, particularly through her charity work. She devoted herself to causes that were close to her heart, including HIV and AIDS awareness, landmine removal, and helping children in need. These engagements gave Diana a sense of purpose and connection that she lacked within her marriage and the royal family. It was in these moments, visiting hospitals, comforting the sick, and speaking on behalf of the marginalized, that Diana truly shined. But this too set her apart from the rest of the royal family, who were more focused on maintaining a certain image rather than actively engaging with the public on emotional issues. Diana's natural empathy and ability to connect with people made her a global icon, but it also deepened the divide between her and the royal family, particularly King Charles. As she grew more beloved by the public, Diana felt more alienated from the institution she was a part of. She once even said that she was supposed to be the princess of the people, but that she felt like the princess of no one. Can you imagine how everyone reacted when she leaked information as heavy as this one? Maybe, just maybe, this was the reason Lady Di started receiving letters from her father-in-law, Prince Philip, in the first place, but there was way more than it initially seemed. While Diana's struggles became more visible, Charles's reaction to their failing marriage took a different path. In public, Charles maintained a composed and controlled image. He continued to fulfill his royal duties and appear at public events alongside Diana, even as their relationship disintegrated behind closed doors. To the outside world, he presented himself as a dutiful prince, but his private life told a different story. In private, Charles's bond with Camilla only grew stronger. Despite the public scrutiny, he continued to confide in her, finding in Camilla the emotional support that was missing in his relationship with Diana. This deepening connection with Camilla further distanced Charles from Diana, creating a sense of emotional abandonment that Diana felt keenly. The more time Charles spent with Camilla, the more estranged Diana became. The royal family had its own way of dealing with these issues by keeping everything private. Emotional struggles were rarely discussed openly, and this approach left Diana feeling even more isolated. There was no guidance or support from the family, no one to turn to for advice or comfort. Charles and Diana's public appearances also became more strained. Behind the smiles for the cameras, there was a growing disconnect between the two. Their body language at events spoke volumes, often revealing the tension that simmered beneath the surface. To many observers, it was clear that something was deeply wrong, but for years the couple tried to keep up appearances for the sake of the royal image. Diana's growing alienation, both from her husband and from the royal family, would play a central role in the unraveling of their marriage. As Charles turned more toward Camilla for support, Diana found herself fighting battles on multiple fronts against the royal family, the media, and her own emotional struggles. This period marked the beginning of the end for the fairy tale, as the cracks in their relationship became impossible to ignore. The mediator and the family in crisis. Prince Philip, often seen as the stern patriarch of the royal family, had a much closer relationship with Princess Diana than many people realize. From the outside, Philip appeared blunt and no-nonsense, with a reputation for making offhand remarks that sometimes stirred controversy. However, behind this gruff exterior, he had a deep commitment to his family and to the monarchy, which drove him to play a more personal role in Diana and Charles's troubled marriage. In the early stages of Diana and Charles's marriage, it became clear that things were not going smoothly. The royal family was no stranger to internal tensions, but the problems between Diana and Charles were not something that could easily be ignored. Seeing the struggles that his son and daughter-in-law were facing, Philip took on the role of mediator. He believed that with the right guidance, Diana and Charles could resolve their differences and salvage their marriage. Philip's experience in his own marriage to Queen Elizabeth shaped his view on the situation. Like Diana, Philip had once been an outsider in the royal family. He had to adapt to the pressures of royal life and the strict expectations that came with being part of the British monarchy. Over the years, Philip had learned to steer through his role as consort to the Queen, which gave him a unique perspective on the difficulties Diana faced. He understood the emotional toll that public scrutiny could take and recognized the challenge of trying to find one's place within the royal institution. Though Philip could be blunt, he genuinely cared for Diana. He sympathized with her struggles and saw her as a key figure in the future of the monarchy. But more importantly, he knew that the stability of the royal family was at stake. The world was watching closely, and any scandal surrounding Diana and Charles's marriage would undoubtedly tarnish the reputation of the monarchy. To Philip, keeping the family together wasn't just about personal feelings, it was about protecting the crown itself. Philip's involvement in Diana and Charles's marriage was motivated by his desire to keep the royal family intact. He had always been fiercely protective of the monarchy, and he knew that a public breakdown in the marriage would have serious consequences. For a time, Philip genuinely believed that he could help Diana and Charles reconcile. He often acted as a mediator, trying to bridge the gap between them and offer advice on how to make the marriage work. However, as the years went by, Philip's frustration grew. Despite his efforts, the rift between Diana and Charles only widened. Charles remained emotionally attached to Camilla, and Diana, feeling increasingly isolated, found it harder to cope with her role within the royal family. Philip's attempts to keep the peace became more difficult, as both Diana and Charles seemed to move further apart. While Philip remained committed to helping them, it was clear that the situation was spiraling out of control. Eventually, even Philip had to accept that the marriage was beyond repair. Though he continued to sympathize with Diana, he recognized that the strain on the family and the monarchy was becoming too great. As much as he wanted to protect the royal image, the reality of the situation could no longer be ignored. By the early 1990s, the problems between Diana and Charles had reached a breaking point. The media was constantly reporting on their marital issues, and the public was deeply invested in the drama. In 1992, the couple officially announced their separation. This marked the beginning of one of the most dramatic periods in modern royal history, with constant media scrutiny surrounding both parties. The royal family, known for keeping its private affairs behind closed doors, was now facing a full-blown public crisis. While the public watched as the marriage crumbled, behind the scenes, the royal family was working hard to contain the damage. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were particularly concerned about how this separation would affect the monarchy's reputation. For decades, the royal family had carefully curated its image, and a public scandal involving the future king was a serious threat. Philip, in particular, was privately worried about how the growing scandal would affect the royal family's standing. His letters reveal his deep concern about the public perception of the monarchy and how this very personal issue had become a global spectacle. He knew that every detail of the separation would be picked apart by the press, and he feared the long-term consequences for the monarchy. One of the key factors that made this crisis even more challenging for the royal family was Diana's relationship with the media. Unlike other members of the royal family, Diana had a unique ability to use the media to her advantage. As the people's princess, she had a direct connection with the public, and she wasn't afraid to share her side of the story. During the Panorama interview, for example, Diana openly discussed the troubles in her marriage, her struggles with mental health, and Charles's relationship with Camilla. It was a shocking moment for the royal family, as they had always valued privacy and discretion. But for Diana, this interview was a way to reclaim her narrative and to show the world what she had been going through. Yet for Philip and the Queen, the interview was seen as a direct challenge to the monarchy's privacy. The royal family had always operated under the belief that their personal matters should remain private, and Diana's decision to speak so openly was viewed as a breach of that unwritten rule. Philip, in particular, was frustrated by how much of the family's internal dynamics were now being aired in public. The interview intensified the media frenzy surrounding Diana and Charles, making it nearly impossible to contain the scandal. After years of public and private tension, Diana and Charles's divorce was finalized in 1996. The emotional toll on both parties was undeniable. For Diana, the divorce marked the end of a tumultuous chapter in her life, but it also allowed her to regain some control over her personal life. For Charles, the divorce allowed him to pursue his relationship with Camilla more openly, though it would take years before the public would fully accept her role in his life. The divorce was the final chapter in one of the most turbulent periods in modern royal history. It marked the end of the fairy tale marriage and the beginning of a new, uncertain era for the royal family. And through it all, Prince Philip's role as both a mediator and protector of the crown left a lasting impact on how the family navigated this very public crisis. But could there be something more? A surprising ally. In an extraordinary move, the Duke of Edinburgh took the unusual step of writing private letters to Diana, offering her guidance and support during some of her darkest moments. But guess what? Prince Philip's secret letters to Diana just leaked the whole secrets about King Charles as well. In one of his letters to Diana, Philip expressed his disapproval of Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. Charles was silly to risk everything with Camilla, he wrote. In another, he stated that the family did not approve of either of the two having lovers, reflecting his frustration with both Charles and Diana's behavior, but notably criticizing his son's actions. Though he could be stern, these letters reveal that Philip empathized with Diana's situation more than the public ever realized. The divorce of Charles and Diana in 1996 was one of the most publicized scandals in royal history. While Queen Elizabeth remained neutral, doing her best to keep the royal family's image intact, Philip was torn. His loyalty to the monarchy was absolute, but in private, he maintained communication with Diana, expressing concern for her well-being. He recognized that Lady Di, despite her own imperfections, had been wronged by Charles's long-standing affair with Camilla, and he felt her life could also be in danger, hinting at the possibility that Diana's fears weren't exactly uncalled for. But what did he mean by that? According to some reports, it turns out that one of those letters confirms what we have all suspected all along. King Charles wanted Diana out of his way, and even went as far as plotting something against her that could have easily gotten him arrested and landed him in jail. What's more, sources claim that he could still be arrested because of what these letters revealed. Just imagine the tears and sad look on his face if that were to happen. But there was more. Sources claim that Philip's letters also referenced his relationship with Diana's sons, Princes William and Harry. The Duke was very close to both boys, and he knew how the breakdown of their parents' marriage would impact them. In his correspondence, he often spoke of the need to shield William and Harry from the media storm that surrounded their family. This concern was shared by Diana, who was fiercely protective of her children throughout her life. The relationship between Philip and Diana wasn't always easy. They had their differences, and Philip didn't always agree with how Diana handled her public life. However, his letters suggest a man who was trying, in his own way, to keep the family together and help Diana through the storm. While Charles leaned heavily on Camilla during this period, Philip's private support for Diana helped her go through some of the most difficult years of her life. So it's safe to say that Prince Philip's efforts to support Diana weren't just about personal loyalty. They were about protecting the institution he had dedicated his life to. By siding with Lady Di, he hoped to keep the family intact for the sake of William, Harry, and the monarchy's future. His letters, now made public, reveal a man who, despite his tough exterior, stood by Diana in her most difficult hours. But what about Charles? Well, sources close to the palace say that after hearing this, the king burst into tears. Could it be that King Charles is indeed responsible for Diana's passing? Let us know in the comments.